Welcome, everyone, to this ProPerks Partner Training at the BHRT Training Academy. Our mission is to bring you the most trusted companies, the strongest clinical tools, and the best practice growth strategies so you can deliver exceptional outcomes for your patients at the best pricing. Today, we're highlighting a partner that perfectly aligns with that mission. It's All Clear Healthcare, a diagnostics and testing company that is redefining how providers diagnose and treat chronic gut health conditions. We all know that gut health directly impacts hormone health. All Clear is building the most trusted med tech diagnostic platform for wellness and longevity, and they've made gut testing rapid, accurate, affordable, and easy for providers to integrate. Their CLIA certified lab delivers 24-hour turnaround at home, non-invasive breath test for IBS, SIBO, and food intolerances, offering clinically supported results at a very accessible price point. So what truly sets All Clear apart is their Kickstart Gut Health Program. It's a complete turnkey system that includes clinical protocols, social content, and gastroenterologist-led education from more than 30 years of clinical experience. It gives you everything you need to seamlessly add chronic gut health diagnostics into your practice, boosting your patient outcomes while also giving you a meaningful revenue stream. So I am so incredibly honored to have joining me today Dr. Ilana Gurevich and Bill Stoner, who is the CEO of All Clear. And Dr. Gurevich, she's a naturopathic physician. She's a licensed acupuncturist and a fellow of the American Board of Naturopathic Gastroenterology. She runs a gastroenterology focused clinic in Portland. She specializes in IBD, IBS, SIBO, and complex functional GI disorders. And she co-hosts 2 respected podcasts. I love the name of this one, The Turd Nerds. So creative. And The Point of Medicine. And she has been named one of Portland's top docs 5 times. She's a clinician, educator, and mentor with deep expertise in integrative GI medicine. Dr. Gurevich, I'm so thankful to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so excited to talk about this topic that is affecting so many of our patients that we have such good solutions and treatments for. So let me just tell you guys a little bit about myself and then, what I do and how I practice and dovetail into how hormones can affect us. So what I do is I'm a naturopathic physician and I run a gastro-focused practice almost exclusively. Because I'm a naturopathic physician, women tend to go to the doctor much more than men do. And so the majority of my practice, probably 75% of them are women. And women, as we age, the reason why probably 2/3 of the population that I see are women in this peri and postmenopausal state. And the reason they're seeking me out really has to do with the fact that their GI is going through drastic changes and they cannot explain why they feel so different. So women will often come in and say, recently, within the last year, within the last 3 years, within the last 6 months, I'm noticing a multitude of symptoms. One of them is my brain's not working, my temperature regulation isn't as good, I'm more fatigued. But the other subset of what they're walking in with, I've got gas, I've got bloating, I've got change of bowel habits, I'm having more constipation, I don't feel like myself. And you look at them and you're like, okay, this is in that bell curve of females whose hormones are starting to change. Hormones are very interesting because they affect all aspects of our health. And the other thing that affects hormones is our GI tract and our microbiome. We're in a state right now where patients are finally getting educated about what the microbiome is. But let me just give a big picture view because that always helps. So the microbiome is defined as the microbial community that we have within our GI tract. We are actually more bacteria than human. We have 10 times as much bacterial DNA in our system than we do human us DNA. We are basically just species. We're basically a big tube with hands and feet to walk our tube around so that we can feed and eat. Our personality is shaped by our microbiome. Our mitochondria is shaped by our microbiome. The way we feel, our weight is shaped by our microbiome. It is all heavily impacting who we are as humans. And that microbiome plays a massive role in how your body processes hormones. So, when we're young and we go through puberty, we go through this pretty drastic change in not only our hormonal state, but with that in our microbiome state. And then again, during the peri and postmenopausal change, we go through as drastic of a change in our microbiome. That change in our microbiome is affecting how we're responding to the hormonal shutdown that women are going through. So the decrease of estrogen and the decrease of progesterone is leading to a change of the microbiome that's leading to females feeling different in their body than they felt 5 years ago. And so what I want to talk about as somebody, like, my passion is, how do I get people to have a healthy GI tract? The way I define a healthy GI tract is you should feel your stomach when you're hungry. You should feel when you have to poop. But besides that, you're not really thinking about your GI. You're not thinking about your bloating. You're not thinking about the last time you had a bowel movement. You're not thinking about pain. The GI tract just kind of does its own thing. It's its own nervous system. It does its own thing. If you're spending a lot of time thinking about your GI tract, the same amount of time that you're thinking about why is your brain not working, why do you have vaginal dryness, why do your joints hurt, why are you not as mobile as you used to be, and why are you having weight gain? For me, that's the symptom picture that we are needing to support women through. So because I'm primarily GI focused, I have patients coming in with GI disorders. And when a patient walks into my clinic, I will immediately try to figure out what part of their GI tract is not working. So I take a really comprehensive history, and the first thing I think about is esophagus and stomach, right? Reflux, food stagnation, abdominal, stabbing pain. That would be an upper GI thing. Then I think about the middle GI or the small bowel. Small bowel presentation is usually bloating is the number one symptom that we see with a small bowel presentation. Also reflux, also food stagnation, like you feel like things are not moving through. So that's small bowel, abdominal pain, belching, reflux, all of that's going to be small bowel derivative. And then large bowel derivative would be diarrhea and constipation, and maybe lower abdominal pain, but you're not going to have bloating as a major pain. So if a patient walks into my clinic and I'm trying to do a workup on what's going on, if they're having a bunch of diarrhea and stool changes, I am definitely going to do a large bowel stool workup. But if they're having a lot of abdominal pain, especially periumbilical abdominal pain, and they're having bloating and distension, I'm going to start thinking about doing a small bowel workup. And they're drastically different. So a couple of points that are important for patients to remember, or providers to remember. Your small intestine and your large intestine has a drastically different microbiome. So the microbiome of your small intestine, if you take a scope and you look at how much bacteria is at the bottom of the small intestine, in a mil, there's about 10 to the third or 1,000 bacterial species of microbiome. If you take that same sample at the top of the large intestine, there is 10 to the 12th or 1 trillion bacteria, distinctly different, right? The other thing that it's super important to remember is not only is there a different amount of bacteria, but there's also a different population of bacteria. And the problem with stool testing is they're incredibly effective at figuring out what's happening in the large intestine, but they have zero accuracy at figuring out what's happening in the small intestine. So, weird fact that most people don't know, your small intestine the microbiome of your small intestine actually has more in common with a microbiome of a mouse than it does with a microbiome of your own large intestine. The structure of the small bowel is completely different. So small bowel has something called colonocytes and enterocytes, and large bowel has colonocytes, different molecules that do different things. Small bowel's job is mainly to absorb nutrients and break down and digest. Large bowel's job is to ferment and to absorb water. So you need different functional cells. Also, because there's so much less bacteria in the small intestine. So the analogy that I give to patients and providers is the analogy of a house, right? So if we're combining, you're looking at your bowel as a house, we've got the house, like the walls of the house, or the floor of the house, right? That's your colonocytes or your enterocytes. Then we've got the foundation, a thick layer. That's the mucin layer, right? That mucin layer is a protective barrier that protects the body from the microbiome, either the dirt or your microbiome. And if the small intestine has one layer of mucin and the large intestine has two, they are drastically different makeup. So when we're working up a patient, if we're only looking at their large intestine, you are going to miss that whole picture and you are not going to be able to move the needle. And, it's a little bit few and far between of women who are going through peri and postmenopause who are not going to have some kind of digestive changes because the hormones are no longer in the play. And so that's super important because when they come in, you want to be prioritizing what is the right thing to be working on. Do you need to be doing a stool test or do you need to be doing a breath test to figure out what's going on in there? So let's talk about breath tests because it's actually super interesting. So there's not a good way to actually figure out as rigidly as we have with the large intestine what microbiome is in the small intestine. There's just not a great way to do that. And so one of the ways to do it is you go under endoscopy and they sedate you, which obviously has its side effects. And when they're in there and they're taking biopsies of the top of the small intestine or the very bottom of the small intestine, they can then take an aspirin. The problem is that's super expensive. The other problem is the small intestine is very long and very curvy, and there are no scopes that can fit through there, right? So it's just not a practical way to do it. Under endoscopy, when they're trying to take biopsies, they're really only getting about 12 inches into the duodenum. Under colonoscopy, when they can get through the entire large bowel, because it's kind of like a U, they can get into about 6 inches of the terminal ileum or the bottom of the small intestine. Anything else we can't see. So because of that, many, many years ago, I think in the 1970s or 80s, they realized that a really good surrogate marker for figuring out what's happening in the small intestine is the breath test, right? So what's a breath test? A breath test is you are basically doing some kind of fast or detoxification protocol where you're avoiding fiber. That's really what you're trying to avoid. The reason you're avoiding fiber is because you don't want to feed. You're trying to quiet down and not feed the bacteria that's in the small intestine. And if you're diarrhea predominant, then you do this this diet for 1 day. If you're constipation predominant, I have patients do it for 2 days. But that's kind of giving the microbiome a little bit of rest. Then you wake up after this 1 to 2 day, prep diet is what we call it. You wake up after this 1 to 2 day prep diet and you hang out for an hour and you let your GI tract kind of warm up. Then you take a breath sample. So one, a breath sample is not a stool sample. It's like that a lot more. They're very tired of collecting their poop. Two, the breath sample is a baseline to know where you are after your fast. Then you take a substrate, and the substrate is a little bit negotiable. It's either glucose or lactulose. And we'll talk about why you choose one or the other in a second. But you take a substrate, and then with that substrate, you start a timer and you track the way that that substrate is working down your GI tract for the next just about 3 hours. That's really important because I just gave you digestive rest. And now I'm trying to see what is biting, what is basically fermenting and letting off gases. There's two gases we're looking at. We're looking at hydrogen and we're looking at methane. Hydrogen is made by bacteria. Methane is made by archaea or methanogens. And that is not a bacteria. So everybody remembers, obviously, high school biology, when we learned about bacteria, viruses, fungi, and archaea. It's a whole different species and it has a whole different mechanism and it requires a whole different treatment, which is, I'm going to talk about the importance of testing mainly because you need a map for what you're treating. But that's what the breath test is looking at. Bacteria produce hydrogen, archaea produce methane. So that gives us a very well-validated, very old technology that lets us know what kind of microbes are in the small intestine. So That's the test. It's not difficult to do. It's a little bit painful to not eat because you have to be fasting on that day. I will just say, as an aside, my niece was visiting me from the UK and she was having a bunch of constipation and bloating and distension. And we were driving up to Canada to go on vacation. And she just sat in the car collecting her breath over every 15 to 20 minutes over the course of the car ride. No issue doing anything. Her alarm would ring. She'd collect her breath. It's exceptionally easy to do. And you can do it in work or do it and clean your house. It's pretty easy to do. So then we talk about substrate. There are two substrates that are available. One is glucose, which is sugar, which is available anywhere, and one is lactulose, which is a pharmaceutical. And there is a little bit of drama in if you're going to choose glucose or lactulose, and it depends on where you come from, and it also depends on the patient you have in front of you. But both of those are useful to diagnose bacterial overgrowth or bacterial changes. So it's exceptionally easy to run the test and have the patient do it. The other thing that's super important is what comes up positive, because you cannot treat hydrogen overgrowth the same way that you treat methane overgrowth. They present differently, they respond to different things. And unfortunately, if you're not testing, you actually can't be 100% sure what you're treating. And then the other thing is, if you're not testing, you also are not even clear on what they have going on in their microbiome. And if you're just assuming, oh, this is a SIBO picture. So in the conventional world, what we do is Xifaxan or rifaximin if it's hydrogen overgrowth. And then for methane overgrowth, we do either metronidazole or neomycin, or I like nitazoxanide as our secondary therapy, right? That's the pharmaceutical standard of care. The reality is that gastroenterologists are not super interested in bacterial overgrowth and SIBO. They're not very interested in IBS as a whole, right? They don't have a lot of tools. So what often happens is they will say, okay, we scoped you. It's not that. We ran some objective markers, their diarrhea. Maybe they ran a pancreatic elastase, or maybe they ran a fecal fat test, which by the way is borderline torture. Okay, it's not that. Just take 2 weeks of Xifaxan. The problem is that if you don't have a test that is showing you what the overgrowth is, then you are never going to know if you treated the right thing. I had a patient come in that was, I think I saw them a week and a half ago, and they were like, well, I went to see my gastro. My gastro gave me Xifaxan. I took Xifaxan. I'm not any better. I'm still constipated. And I was like, A, is it SIBO? And, we don't know. And now Xifaxan at the moment is still a very expensive drug. It's about $1,200 if you don't have insurance coverage. We don't know if it's bacterial overgrowth or if it's a mixed picture of both bacteria and methane. So I might need you to pay another $1,200 to redo the Xifaxan with the proper treatment. But also, we're not even clear if you've got bacterial overgrowth. There are other things that present like bacterial overgrowth that aren't. Fungus presents like bacterial overgrowth, but isn't. If you don't have a test, there's no way you can rule it in or out. And so that's the other piece of the process is we need to figure out what you have in there. We need to figure out how to properly treat you. We have options pharmaceutically, we have options herbally, and then we have an elemental diet, which is exceptionally effective, but exceptionally difficult to do. And that's the other thing. I've got these 3 trains of treatment that I can pull on. If somebody is coming back and their breath test is comically high, like I'm hitting methanes in the 90s, 100s, 110, and I'll tell you about reading the test in a second, but I'm going to say this makes sense for me to borderline torture you with elemental diet because that's the strongest treatment that I have. And I can't bank on the fact that you can afford or you're going to get 4 rounds of Xifaxan that may or may not work at $1,200 a pop, right? So if I'm seeing that, I'm going to be like, okay, this is going to direct my care. This is going to be a great way for me to tell you what you have. I have a map and how to treat. I can tell you what's going to happen from there. So when you get the test back, it's a very simple binary yes or no. It's a graph, right? The first thing you're going to see on the methane and the hydrogen line is the baseline. This is before you introduce a substrate. An hour after you wake up, you're going to take that breath sample. If that hydrogen baseline is over 20, it makes the whole test a little bit of an asterisk. Like you didn't give me a great prep diet. If it's under 20, we're good. And what I'm looking for hydrogen is an elevation of 20 parts per million of hydrogen from baseline, right? So if you're at a 40, if you're at a 60, if you're at an 80, that's going to tell me degree of severity. Methane actually kind of does its own thing. Diet is not nearly as important for methane. A positive methane is any finding that's 10 or over. And so with those results, I am really confident that I know what I'm treating. And I'm also super confident that I know how to treat it. So then, treatment. Let's talk about treatment. Treatment is relatively easy to manage. I will say bacterial overgrowth or SIBO falls into this pool that I like to say 30, 30, 30. 30% of people, it's a one and done. These are usually the mild elevation numbers. There's not a lot going on. It's not super complicated. They're probably not super chronic. A third of SIBO patients are, you kind of have to work them a couple of times. Their numbers are higher. They're more moderate to severe. One round of antibiotics or herbs are not going to manage it. And then a third of patients you treat again and again and you find again and again, but you're treating the wrong thing because it's not getting better. Those test results are not changing when you've done a clinically validated treatment plan. And you kind of, at that point, you need to start thinking a little bit outside of the box and thinking you just happen to find SIBO, but that's not the only thing that's happening. And then you want to think about other chronic GI conditions like fungal overgrowth, like parasites or protozoa, like biofilm issues, or like chronic systemic infections that are more complicated to treat. So with the population, what you need is you need to understand what's happening. What I see a lot in the industry, and by the way, I run a lot of stool tests, but if you're not seeing your patient in the beginning and working up exactly what's not working in their GI tract, any BHRT support that you offer patients is not going to be nearly as reliable. They are not going to be feeling better. And a lot of their pain point is obviously the hot flashes and the brain fog and the night sweats. And a lot of their pain point is the microbial changes. And so with the microbial changes not being addressed, you're probably going to stall out with patient care. Bill, do you want to talk about what you guys do at Auckland?
Yeah, because you really
Yeah.
some really important things, and I appreciate the distinction you made between when to do small bowel testing and when to do larger bowel testing. And can I oversimplify that and say when you're seeing bloating and distension, better do a small bowel? Okay.
I would say bloating, distension, periumbilical pain, like
Mm-hmm.
lower abdominal, rectal, or perineal pain, that's probably more large bowel. Pain in the center of the abdomen, that's
Mm-hmm.
going to be small bowel. And then the other place that I think about is chronic reflux and belching.
Okay.
So it's the part of your GI that makes you uncomfortable to be in public.
Yes. Okay. And so and yes, you alluded to the connection between estrogen and progesterone, and when those things change, that's going to affect the microbiome and the GI tract. But you are not ruling out younger women, I am sure, because we see those fluctuations in the month cycle trigger the same thing. So you're speaking inclusively of all ages.
Can I talk about that? Because that's like my other favorite topic. Okay, so we've discovered like a bunch of new organs in the last 5 years, right? One of the organs that we've discovered is the microbiome, which, by the way, is being eradicated, something frightening with all of our antibiotics and pesticides and herbicides and fungicides. But the other organ that we've discovered is called the estrobolome, which is fascinating. The estrobolome is the part of the microbiome that comes in and out of bloom depending on where you are in your cycle, right? So this is why women get period poops, because their microbiome is drastically shunting to start cleaning up the hormones that are spiking and troughing within the cycle. So yes, we absolutely see this SIBO IBS presentation even in children that are prepubescent, mainly because we're just wreaking havoc on our microbiome. And the peri and postmenopausal female is just so rapidly changing her microbiome, because the reality about women and menopause is, as opposed to men whose hormones, slowly taper down, women's hormones literally fall off the cliff.
Okay. Thank you. This is fascinating. Would love to have a very long clinical discussion. But Bill, Talk to us about the test, the all clear test, so our providers understand how to work with you. And okay, so she's talked us through, you got a baseline level, then you're adding the substrate, you're rechecking. So first of all, how long does the test take? And then talk to us more specifically about, what do our providers need to know?
Yeah, I mean, this is the prevalence has just gotten so high over the last, decade or so that I think most practices, large percentage of people walking through that practice have got gut health issues. And a significant portion have got these chronic gut health issues. So we have a breath test, non-invasive, very affordable. Our SIBO starts at 189, which is highly affordable. Ilana will tell you that, and highly accurate. It's the Quintron device. That device has been around for years. It's got all the clinical studies to support it. There are a lot of, as Ilana has said before, there are a lot of there's some handheld devices, which there is no CO2 correction. There is no calibration. That immediately disqualifies it for practice use in our opinion. We're sort of do it right or don't do it at all focused practice. Tens of billions of dollars a year are spent on unnecessary emergency room visits, productivity loss, and generally miserable lives. It's 3 to 5 years to get to better gut health. Because our acute system, and both my grandfathers were doctors, I am not, our acute system is going to help you when you've got real acute issues. Chronic issues this community is going to take care of that. So we've got a kit that is at home, mail in. We provide a symptom checker. Our CMO emeritus, who was our founding CMO, is Dr. Martin Hahn, German, very fastidious, 30 years of gastroenterology experience. Dr. Leonard on the Yale board, written a couple books on functional medicine, he runs a concierge practice and some other clinics. We've got a lot of great experts, including Ilana, Dr. Gurevich here. And it's a test that any organization can bring on. And I think the key is knowing that you're really going to need to incorporate testing. I know medical school said a stool test, but the world has changed. And if it's presenting in the upper GI, you need to do a breath test. And I'm not advocating for one or the other. Both are hugely important. So our job is to keep the trains running quickly. We'll turn it around in 24 hours. We've made it highly affordable, and we're using nothing but the best. Yeah. It's 3 hours, and 3 hours. And so what I'll say is you need to be focused, right? Know that you want to set aside some time the next morning. You want to set aside some time the night before to make sure you lay everything out and know exactly what it is you need to do. It's not that complicated. And when you wake up in the morning, take a little bit of a pause, start your alarm, take your baseline, and every 20 minutes for the number of tubes that are in the kit, and a lactose intolerance test might take 4 to 6 tubes. Ilana would know better, but it's all over 3 hours. You can bring a book. You can work at your computer. It's a 3 to 5 year journey. You're stuck to your home and your toilet, and this is a way to very quickly get yourself onto the road to better health. And I think the practitioners can really incorporate this discipline pretty easily. Yes. And so, yep, mail it. And you don't have to go to UPS and you don't have to go to FedEx. You literally put it in your mailbox. The postal system brings it to us in a couple days. And from the moment we receive that test, we'll turn it around in 24 hours. And digital results are sent to the practitioner and can also go directly to the patient at the same time. And it's a binary output. You are or you aren't positive, and we provide you with the graph of the output of the methane and hydrogen. And I think that's what we'd like to offer for BHRT practitioners. We have expert clinical providers in gut health. Dr. Ilana Gurevich, we've got Andrew Leonard, Dr. Hahn, and others who are collaborative and collegial and sharing their clinical protocols. We're assembling that. And I'd like to, we're building out not just clinical protocols, but life protocols, diet, sleep, exercise, right? So that we really look at this thing holistically. And we're also providing business playbooks. For those of you that are doing gut health testing, it's a very easy swap to get. We're considerably less expensive than the competition. We're faster. We're best in class accuracy. So you can do that. But if you want to get programmatic, and if you listen to a lot of the consultant coaches, and there are a number of them out there, sort of little McKinseys helping businesses, practices get really smart about the business side. They're all saying get programmatic. And so what we do is provide business playbooks, which include how would you structure that? What are the emails that you could use to go out to educate your population on gut health? What are the social media assets? We are sharing those. We are sharing website content. And we are even sharing patient intake forms to drive the patient into a meeting, a paid meeting typically, with the practitioner, so that, and 80% of these people will not buy the program potentially at the outset, but from the moment they purchase a test, which you will recommend, which is a lot less expensive than a program, you've got a time to educate them, demonstrate you care, show them how you've solved these problems for others, and you'll have another opportunity to upsell that patient into a program. And if you get patients into a program, these are people who want to solve a problem. They've been at it a long time, and they are going to be considerably more compliant, and you will have better patient outcomes. So I think it's a win-win for everyone. Ilana, do you want to add anything else to that?
The reason why I fell in love with All Clear is, which Bill, mentioned, is, they're using the Quintron machine, which has been validated for decades. You can't really say that about every test that's on the market. For me as a clinician, I care about patient outcomes, and I care that the testing is validated. All Clear does that. They are nailing that. So that's the main thing that I want to say, is it gives me full trust in the test that I'm running, because I know that it's lots of people have validated and revalidated that test.
It is very easy. I will share a screen which gives a QR code and a link that if you would like to bring on gut health testing, it's a 3-minute procedure to put your contact information, NPI number. There are certain practitioner credentials that are required to order directly through us, but we are also working with Avexia and supported by Avexia Diagnostics, which for those who don't have full credentialing, they can go get a doctor's order on top of that. And we're trying to help democratize gut health, but very close to clinical expertise and practitioners. That's the way to do this. And in addition to that, there's another QR code and link that will get you access to all of these business playbooks and all these go-to-market assets for the practitioners to help them really build a strong business. Because what I've seen is this is a really committed group of people. They're working very hard. If we can help them generate $5,000 to $30,000 of monthly recurring revenue getting programmatic, then they can build out a bigger team. They can be more present with their patients, and we all end up with better outcomes. So we don't make a distinction. We're trying to price this as low as we can, and the way to make money is actually to get programmatic. And this does bringing on gut health actually drives increased utilization of your team, which makes you a more productive. It takes a lot of the strain off of the head of the practice and helps to distribute some of that work and drive better incomes for the practice. So it's $189 for the SIBO test down to $250 per test. Each test is different, has a different substrate to challenge different parts of the gastrotract. And you can be up and running in a couple days. And we've got a great team that will, as a customer success team, work in lockstep with your internal team to help you get organized to make this a reality. We even have independent agencies who, this is typically a $7,500 program because it takes a long time. We've tried to build those Gantt charts to make it really easy for practitioners to work with our team and their team and an agency to get this done in 3 to 6 weeks. And if you get it done in 3 to 6 weeks, it's only going to cost you $2,500. So many agency or many practices will have their own agency resources to help them. Others might be looking for some assistance. So we're trying to build an ecosystem that really helps people get successful fast. Yeah, and the one thing I would say is it's just this new modus operandi can really help solve these long, ongoing chronic issues really quickly. And this community has those people walking into their door every single day. And the other great thing is, if you want people to come in and learn more about other elements of your business, gut health is a major driver of engagement for practices right now. Everybody's got a gut health problem, unfortunately.
I just really am so grateful for what you guys. Sorry, one more time. Yes, about 50% about 50% of our listenership are clinicians, and then 50% are general public. I've teamed up with another naturopathic physician and a functional medicine medical doctor, and literally we just talk microbiome. So that's a really great resource. That's a really great resource if you're trying to wrap your head around functional GI disorders, is the Turd Nerds podcast.
Yep. And All Clear is building a body of intelligence as well that we can make available to practitioners through our collegial and collaborative practitioners. Thank you, Don. Yeah, I mean, if you're comfortable, it's a really quick switch. If you haven't done this before, we've got a team. So to get these assets, you want to set up a few minutes so we can walk you through them and get you on the path to success. So we're giving you both of those options, whichever one you feel more comfortable with.
Thanks,
Really
Donna.
enjoyed it. Thank you, Donna.